Hello, superhero fans. Welcome to another episode of Vigilante Vibes, a Marvel podcast where we discuss all things Marvel, MCU, and nerd culture. I'm your host, Max Taff, joined by the Quicksilver to my Scarlet Witch, Megan Nicole.
Hello, mutants and fellow nerds. Like Max said, we're here to give you all the Marvel talk, but in a non toxic way. It's the fun of the fandom without the gross toxicity that's running rampant in all the fandoms. But today, we have a very special guest joining us.
That's right, we have Chris Stahl, the Long Box Punk. Welcome, Chris. Tell us about yourself.
Hey, A of all, thanks for having me on. I just am stoked to be hanging out with you guys for a little bit here. I am the Long Box Punk. I host a YouTube show here on the YouTube and audio everywhere. I love talking to indie comic creators that are very much in line with the DIY mindset, that are making the comics that they want to see on the shelves. So the show is basically indie comics meets music, meets a whole lot of laughter, because I love comics. I have since I was like 7, and all sorts of ranges of everything, lots of history with comics, and it's now a thing that I love talking to other people about and trying to raise and boost voices of all the indie creators that are out there.
Oh, I love
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, thanks. I kind of accidentally stumbled into it. I was doing a radio show, and then it was like hosted on Spotify, and Spotify was like, "Hey, we're not going to do this anymore. We don't support your format." And so I was faced with do I continue doing something creative, or do I just let it die and go away? And I have to have a creative outlet because my day job, I work at a bank of all places.
Okay.
So it's kind of imposter syndrome, like stick it to the man, and then I show up for the man Monday through Friday.
I know. It's a struggle.
But what I do doesn't define who I am. So so I have always loved comics, and I was like, how do I combine music and comics? And I just kind of floated it out, I think, on Threads and on Twitter. Like, I'm thinking about doing a comic interview thing. And within a week of that post, I had like 3 different creators reach out saying, hey, if you get this off the ground, I would love to come on. How do I help? And so then I just kind of stumbled into, okay, how do I stream? How do I do video interviews? And I just kind of figured it out. And within 2 weeks, I had 5 interviews scheduled, and now 4 months into it, because I only started in this past March. I'm already scheduled into September. I already have October planned, because I'm going to do all horror all month long in October. That's a announcement. I haven't said that anywhere else, so that's the special info just for the vigilantes here.
Thank you.
I love horror comics. I love horror movies. That's always been my go-to. And I just thought, like, in the DIY, do the thing that you want to see. I want to see more people talking about horror in October. And why not do an entire month of horror shows? And so that's what I'm going to do. I've got guests already signed up, and I just need to send out actual details of recording dates, and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
That's amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the exclusive.
And I love that you're trying to give more of a spotlight to indie comic creators, because comic creators in general are underrated. I can name you any actor that's been in a Marvel movie. You'll know who it is. But if I tell you about the letterer, Joe Sabino, you probably won't, because it's not as flashy. It's not as sexy as being the actor. So I really love that you're giving them that place in the world and giving them the credit they deserve, because that's making a comic is hard. I could never. So
it's a lot
all
of
the
work.
kudos to them.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And to your point, I led like a Marvel trivia at a local like hangout bar place that I go to. And I was asking all sorts of Marvel questions, DC questions, all about the movies and stuff. And as the night went on, the questions get harder. And one of the questions I asked, so Hawkeye is my favorite Avenger,
Mhm.
because to me, like everybody else has these incredible powers or this incredible bank account, and he
Mm-hmm.
just has incredible determination to like be the best. And
Yeah.
so he's hanging tough along with Black Widow with all of these like people that he has no right to hang tough with. And so I love Hawkeye. I love the books. I love the character. I love him in the MCU, all of the things. And one of the things that I asked was the show Hawkeye is very closely based on a comic book series by which two creators, and not a single person got it right. Like for
Yeah.
some people, that was
Wow.
the only question they missed. And that to me was like, how do you, like, everybody knows Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And then if you continue to poke and prod, they might come up with some other names like Todd McFarlane, John
Chris
Romita
Claremont.
Jr., like Chris Claremont. Yeah, all of
Mm-hmm.
the, you know, the big name people. But I realized in the moment, like, we love these movies, and people that love the movies, it's not translating to also loving comics. Sure, there's an uptick, but there's
Uh-huh.
not enough of one to me personally, because I'm like, everybody needs to read the comics. Like, just
Yeah.
everybody needs to read comics. There's something for everybody with the vast majority of what's being published now, even from Marvel, even from DC. If you don't want the big two, like the mid card indie scene of like the Images, the
Mm-hmm.
Dark Horse, Boom, all of those studios are putting out incredible stuff. If you go even deeper, there's indie creators that are making incredible books, and they just don't have the exposure, so nobody knows about them. And so that's where
Yeah.
I was like, how do I, in a very small way, try and elevate this medium that has meant so much to me and is really core to who I am. Like, that's, I lead with, hey, I'm Chris, I'm a big nerd, I love comic books, I like pro wrestling, I like fancy beer. Like, that's just, I listen to a lot of music, I go to concerts, that's who I am. And so everybody knows that, like, right off the
Mm-hmm.
bat. So it's been a challenge to try and, I don't know, do as much as I can. I never feel like I'm doing enough, you know, to give
Mm-hmm.
back to the industry and the medium, because it has, like, there are pivotal moments in my life that I look at and I'm like, I probably wouldn't have gotten through junior high had I not been reading X-Men, because
Mm.
Yeah.
X-Men were weird and I was weird and they were still saving the world. So it's okay that I'm weird. You know, like
Absolutely.
Yeah.
those moments are what make comics so special. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. That's beautiful. I love that, Chris. What the heck?
That's so nice.
That was a great
So
answer.
Yeah.
that's,
That was
yeah, I
great.
think I answered like 87 questions after you asked one of them. So,
That's the best. That's the best way.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of information to go off of there. And yeah, I like a couple of things that you said, like how, nowadays it's not just the big two, it's not just Marvel DC. There's so many amazing indie smaller comics that, don't get enough love. And there's so many options now. So if you don't find what you're looking for in Marvel or DC, there's a plethora of other avenues you can go down. And
yeah.
to another point that you made about, comparing movies to comics, it's such a different form of entertainment and such different storytelling that
Yeah.
it's like completely almost two different things, like apples oranges sometimes, right? So
Yeah.
that's really amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very much like some things that work in cinema, because I actually have like a broadcasting background. That's what my degree is in.
Mm.
And so I took like media aesthetics classes, and I get real nerdy when I go to the movies, because I'll get excited about, you know, some of like the shot composition, or, you know, how something is technically being executed, and I'll get really excited. My wife will like roll her eyes and elbow me, like, we're in the theater, like, stop it. And I'm just like, that was an incredible. Sorry, I'm sorry. But I can't turn it off.
Don't silence me.
Right. So it's better that we watch things at home, because then, you know, I can see things that, or like I'll see some of the behind the scenes or making of. Like, I'm the person that watches all of those special features on DVDs, because I'm
Same.
just
Hmm.
fascinated with the craft.
I love that.
Mhm.
Yes.
And there's things that work in movies that would never work in a comic, and vice versa,
Hmm.
where like you have, I talk to a lot of horror creators, and they always talk about the page turn. And like, that's a big reveal when you're reading comics, that if you're not creating for comics, you don't even think about. And then, but there's definitely times once someone mentions it, the next comics that you both read, you're suddenly going to be thinking about the page, like there's going to be a big reveal here. And there's the big splash page and the hero pose and whatever. So, but yeah, the craft is just so fascinating to me.
Wow, it seems like you have a lot of passion for it, which I think is really cool.
I do, yeah.
It's refreshing.
And I can't hide that.
Yeah, you shouldn't either. It's good to be passionate about those things, and if you're knowledgeable about something, you should like flex and be like, yeah, I know everything about that. Like, what of it?
I don't know everything yet, but I'm trying to get there. My latest, so I get hyper focused on stuff, and then I just like have to learn everything about that thing. And currently, that's lettering with comic books.
Yeah.
Ooh,
because I've talked to a couple letterers, and like I notice, because I consider myself like a step past just a casual comic consumer, and so I'm always analyzing like how things are written or how like page layouts. I'm not a fan of the like Watchmen 12 panel grid that's very stoic. It's very boring. To me, like if you give me an asymmetrical page layout with something exploding out of a corner panel and you've got energy happening all over, that's way more engaging to me than the 12 panel stoic boring Watchmen page layout. And I was talking to a letterer and I was just like, I don't understand how you can only do lettering. And so he was like, I'm glad you asked. And just kind of started explaining it to me. And it's a very subtle thing that if it's done well, you don't even notice. If it's not done well, you notice right away. And when he said that, I was just like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like I can understand that now, because I don't think about lettering, because usually the books that I'm reading is done well, but in the books that I read where it's not done well, I definitely notice right away. Where I'm like, that doesn't fit the page, or it feels awkward, or it doesn't look like it sits right in the panel. Yeah. And so it rings true. But that's just I just can't turn that off. Now that I know, I just can't turn it off.
There's definitely been a few that I've read that I'm like, oh, okay, I'll trust you guys, but in my unprofessional opinion, I don't recommend that.
Right.
So, what kind of Marvel comics are you into?
So X-Men will always be my go-to. Here recently, like it's cut off, but I'm gonna jump out of frame. Like X-Men are a big deal for me. That's all of my pages. Wow. The 4 comics that are there are signed. That's a reprint of X-Men number 4 signed by Stan Lee.
Oh my gosh.
That's Wolverine number 1 signed by Chris Claremont. That's X-Men from the 90s number 4, the first appearance of Omega Red on the cover, signed by Jim Lee. And you can't see that because his reflection, but that's Wolverine 78 signed by Larry Hama. And that's one of the first comics that I remember buying, like picking out for myself, because my dad used to bring me to the shops, and I would pick up and he was just like, oh, here's Superman and here's Batman, because that's what kids read, right? And then I discovered Wolverine and the X-Men, and I was like, this is what kids read. Like this is my thing. And that Wolverine book is the first book that I picked out for myself, because the comic was it's where he's on his knees and he's got the bone claws, the one hand is broken, and the whole background just says Wolverine in giant letters. And I was just like, oh, and I had to have it. And so like when I met Larry Hama, who wrote that book, that's in the middle of his run, and it's not like a key issue for anything. There's no major, like it's probably worth $1, whatever. I don't buy books, or the books that I do love and ask people to sign, it's because there's a personal touch for it for me. And so I told Larry Hama that story, and I can't just say Larry. I told Larry Hama that story. Yeah, and he was just like, that is such a neat, thank you for telling me, like, and really took it to heart and personalized it for me and gave it back to me, and I was just like, this is such a cool thing to have. Like, thank you for
That
being
is
awesome.
cool.
That's so nice.
So, but yeah, so that
That's
was,
nice.
I did a lot of, I've gotten lucky with a lot of the creators that I've met where they haven't been turds. There
Oh,
have been
good.
horror stories that I've heard of some creators just not being great people,
Mhm.
Mm.
and leading to like really awful interactions, which I just don't understand. Like, fans are paying you a ton of money to just get your ink on their thing. Like, how are you going to be a? I don't get it. I don't get it. But I'm also like
Yeah.
a optimist by default, and I always want to see the best in people, even when they give me
Mm.
every reason not to. But I just don't get it. Like, you know what I mean? How can you be
Yeah.
Yeah.
so negative when
I
everything is so
yeah,
positive?
I never understood that.
I've met a couple that I was just like, "Oh, my bad." But okay. But
Yeah,
like I've met some
that's
way more
unfortunate.
really really kind people that are just like, "You really like my stuff? That's amazing." But I think
Hmm.
there
Yeah.
is a certain point where they're just kind of bored. Like they've heard everything
Mm,
anyone could say. "Oh, you're the biggest fan. Oh, he's your favorite. Oh, you have the tattoo." That I think some people just start to get like a little ungrateful, which I'm not going to name any names, but
yeah.
like it does happen. We have met them.
Yeah.
But they don't outweigh the gratefulness and the graciousness of all the other creators that know that they have put on this huge impact on people's lives. Like you said, X-Men was a huge impact on you, which I'm sure so
Yeah.
many other people, and especially if you're of a minority of some kind, it's nice that they
Yeah.
know, and it's nice that they still can see that and say, "Oh my god, I did that." Like, that's just such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
I found out in high school. It's not a lot, but I've got some Native American blood in my
Oh.
lineage that like
Mm.
my dad tracked back. And as soon as he was like, we have like Native American heritage, right? And I was like, really? Warpath is Native American. I wonder if we're this. And like immediately had this attraction to this character in the X-Men because he was also Native American. We're
Mhm.
different
Hmm.
tribes though. He's Cherokee and I'm Abenaki, but that's okay. Like it was it gave me that thing, that extra reason to turn to the X-Men because it was like they have everything. They've
Yeah.
got all walks of life, they've got all racial backgrounds, they've got all every like they have blue people and green people. How can they
Hmm.
have anything negative in them?
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's the one good thing about X-Men, and it has been tried and true since their debut. There have always been a very inclusive bunch, and I
Yeah.
feel like anybody can find themselves in the X-Men or in mutants in general, right?
Yeah.
It's just that's the beautiful thing about those comics for sure.
Yep. Yeah, so that was my going back to your question. that was that's always going to be my default, and there's certain runs that I'm still like trying to plug holes in my collection,
Uh-huh.
um, that I just haven't been able to find. But then I have found as I've gotten older that I'm attracted to like Daredevil,
Yeah.
and
Mm.
I'm
Same.
reading way more. Like, I never would have picked up, and I hate saying this because now he's my favorite, but like I never would have picked up a Hawkeye book when I was in high school or junior high because
Hmm.
I was just like, okay, he shoots arrows. And now I'm like, he only shoots arrows. Like, how does he
Hmm.
do this? And so now I'm reading more of the what I feel like are just the highly trained. I never liked my favorite Superman book is The Death of Superman because
Hmm.
it made him like
Okay.
it made him more real that he
Yeah.
could die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because otherwise it's just like, oh, you can fly, oh, you can x-ray, oh, like, what can't you do other than
Yes.
be perfect? Like, okay, that's not exciting to me. And then
Hmm.
you have Batman, which is the complete opposite, where like everything is broken and everything is terrible except his bank account. And so I was always drawn more to like Robin and Nightwing and his like the Bat family than I was to Batman. And it was always
Hmm.
more about like, if my for DC, Nightwing is my number one. Like, I love Nightwing. I love Green Arrow, which again, I guess I just need to learn archery. So that
Maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, so those are like now with Marvel books I'm reading. I am at a point too with my collection that I have to trade weight for a lot of stuff because I have 12 long boxes and I am out of room in all of the boxes and in my office.
Yeah.
And my
Wow.
wife won't let me get me anymore. But I have a lot of comics, and so I'm getting to where like I just buy the trades, and so I'm excited to be able to read like the recent Gods miniseries that they did, because the roster that they have in that book is fascinating to me. So I want to read that really bad, and then the once the Blood Hunt finishes and they release that on trade, like that's one that I'm real excited to get my hands on, because
Dude.
it just looks like they're using all sorts of dark, nonsensical horror aspects and violence and all the things for that series, and that's got
Dude,
me excited too.
Blood Hunt
Yeah,
has me in
definitely.
such a damn chokehold right now. I and we're supposed to get more Blood Hunt news this weekend at San Diego Comic-Con. So it's going to keep going. So
Mm,
I'm just like, my
Awesome.
God, my poor heart can't take anymore, but I need more. It's highly
Blood Hunt has been a
recommended.
wild ride.
Yeah, it's
great.
very good. Definitely. And when you jump into it, check out Blood Hunters. It's a
Okay.
three mini series within a comic book, and I believe it's 4 runs, and each one has a few different ones. It,
Oh,
I
cool.
think you'll
Okay.
really, really dig it.
Mm.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that. I love. I also accidentally am like picking up a lot of anthologies,
Oh.
or
Mm.
like, short comics that are all just kind of collected around one idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I do a lot of crowdfunding, either on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or Fund My Comic or BackerKit. And a lot of times it's easier for, not to make it about indie comics, but I'm reading a lot of indie comics. Um, but a lot of those indie creators, it's easier to get a lot of creators that can put out like a 4, 5, 6 page short comic story and then have it all about the same idea,
Mm-hmm.
collect it and put that out, instead of having the pressure of, okay, I got to make a 22 to 30 page comic for a single issue standalone, and I only have myself and my like. Anthologies are way easier for a lot of the indie creators that are just trying to get a story out there to like really get some experience, and then they can say, yeah, I was a part of this anthology. I, was published for through lesser known comics with this anthology, or I did that work or this thing, and then suddenly they're building their catalog, and then it gets easier for them to strike out on their own and then start their own series. But so I,
Yeah.
as a result, because I'm reading a lot of indie comics, I'm also enjoying the very short, just 5, 6 pages, because it's incredible what creators can do in 6 pages of comic.
Oh,
Yeah,
so true.
absolutely.
They just comic creators are just so underrated. It only takes 5 or 6 pages just to blow your freaking mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. It's insane, actually.
Yeah.
Um, One question that I have for you, though, you've mentioned a few times that you're really into horror, the horror genre, horror comics. What is it about that like intrigues you so much?
That's a great question. Because I don't know,
Oh,
honestly. I I don't know if it's because I just have like a darker sense of humor that
mm,
I like, that has me drawn to it. So when I was real young, like less than 10, I was over at my nana's house, and on like Star 64 in the local Cincinnati market, they would do double feature movies on Saturdays. And I was there on a Saturday, and my dad was doing work or something, and then so I just like turned on the TV, because what else are you gonna do? And they were doing a Hitchcock double feature of Psycho and The Birds, and those were my first two horror movies, and I just was so captivated. Even like super young, they didn't scare me per se. Like, I didn't have nightmares that I remember, but I
Mhm.
just was like, it was something so different from everything else that I had seen that it just had me. And my dad came to my Nana's and was like, "What are you watching?" And I was like, "It's Hitchcock." And he was like, "Either I've made a terrible mistake or this is okay." Like, that had to have been the battle that he was dealing with, because he just kind of like waited. And I remember him looking at me and looking at the TV and looking at me and looking at the TV. And I just had this stupid grin, like, "Look." And he sat down and we watched the rest of the Birds, and then watched Psycho, and had a great time talking about them. And so ever since then, I just like, I've always liked horror movies. I think it's the adrenaline shot when a movie does get the scare out of you. I just think that like, that's fun to me. I used to hate going to haunted houses, and
Mm.
then I worked as a scare actor, and
Oh,
then I
cool.
managed scare actors and helped like design and decorate and plan and build haunted houses at our local amusement park. And
Very
so
cool.
I think that experience, because I liked horror stuff anyway. At that point, I was in high school and college, and I was like very deeply ingrained in watching all the horror movies, that I was just having a lot of fun doing it. And like, scaring people is a lot of fun, especially ones that everybody else is like, "I'm not going to go after this type of person because they just never get scared." And those were always my target people, because if you do get them scared, like, it's 10 times more satisfying than,
Yeah.
getting the easy, like, I'm not going to scare a bunch of children,
Mhm.
because like anything scares them because they're kids. I'm going to go
Hmm.
after like the grandparents that are here, that are just like, "I don't want to be here." And like, those are the
Oh my
people I'm going to
God.
scare.
Go after the poor grandparents.
that's a whole separate that's a whole separate show, though.
Oh God.
Stuff that I experienced as an actor. But
Crazy.
I think it's because I worked, like, I went through junior high. I had a bad experience at a haunted house. A buddy of mine, like, the actor went too far and ended up cutting his face. He was like a Freddy Krueger knockoff. And
Uh-huh.
one of his blades, he got too close, cut him, and I was just like, "I'm out. Like, this is terrible. I hate these. Never again." And so I
Oh.
Hmm.
didn't go to any through high school. And then in college, I was like, "Well, I need a job." And my sister said they were hiring. So, like, I'll go audition. And they were like, "You audition really well. Do you want to be one of these people?" And so I would walk around the park, and I had knee pads and steel toed boots, and I would slide and throw sparks and like pop up in front of people and terrify them. And so I think, having worked in that and being a part of creating the atmosphere to scare people, I think like knowing how it works makes it more enjoyable for me, because then I know what it takes to scare people. So when I see it done well, it's the appreciation of the craft, kind of like comics, that just heightens my. And like, I feel like horror gets a bad rap because it's always, "Oh, it's just monsters and slashers," and it's like, it's 2024. There's
Hmm.
horror for everything. Like, you can have horror comedies, you can have romance horror with like zombies that are falling in love. There's all sorts of, like, sure, there's still monsters, there's still slashers, there's still the campy gore fests, but like, I don't think gore is scary. I think
Hmm.
gore for gore's sake is just like a cheap thrill.
Mhm.
Um,
Hmm.
I like elevated horror. That's not true. I don't like elevated horror. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm somewhere in the middle. I like a
More
good.
sophisticated horror.
Right. Yes. I like my horror sophisticated with a nice
Exactly.
glass of Chianti. Um yeah, I just think there's so much that horror can do that
Mhm.
a lot of other genres can't do, and can't even come close to doing. That when it's done well, it's really, really done well. And
Hmm.
I think it's the appreciation of when it's done well that keeps me coming back. And I've sat through some really bad, scary movies, but I've also sat through some really, really good ones. And so I just like the good ones outweigh the bad, and even a bad scary movie is still going to be fun. Like it's going to be ridiculous and campy and all of the things, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be an enjoyable hour and a half. So go ahead, send them all to me. I'll just watch everything.
Awesome.
Wow.
Awesome.
Well, so we're nearing the end of our episode. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yeah. So the show Longbox Punk, I've got an Instagram and a Threads specifically for the show. I am trying to do a lot of unique stuff just on those two show based, because I've had like a personal Twitter and Instagram and Threads for longer than I've had the show ones. But yeah, at Longbox Punk is how you find me. Also at Longbox Punk on YouTube, your favorite podcasting platform if you would rather listen instead of watch. But yeah, on Instagram, I do like live Instagram streams every Wednesday night of just kind of like a video update, like a newsletter. I'm on Substack. I've only put out one newsletter so far. But I have ideas, and like a lot of stuff is really still in the formative. I just started a merch store. So if you go to Threadless, you can find 4 designs there for stuff. Actually, I got my button today, so I'm super stoked to have my
awesome
show button. But yeah, it's all the links are on Instagram, and I share them frequently on Threads as well. So that's the easiest way to find the show. If you want my personal thoughts and stuff, on Twitter at I'm Crystal.
We will have him linked wherever you see this video or you hear this podcast at.
Yes. Absolutely. All in the show notes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chris. We had the best time with you.
Yeah. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, we loved it. We appreciate so much that what you do for the comic community, and please keep doing what you're doing.
Yes.
You're doing a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Same goes for the two of you, because it's too easy to fall into negativity. And so intentionally being positive is top marks in my book. So keep on keeping on with the positive vibes, because it's what everybody needs. Everything else is negative. Why should comics be negative?
Agreed. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for saying that. We really try our best, but thank you. We like to be that positive voice in the fandom, and that's why we started this whole thing. So we're glad that people actually recognize that. Thank you very much.
Great.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Vigilante Vibes, a Marvel podcast. Until next time, you can follow me on Twitter at Vigilante Vibes.
You can follow me on Twitter at Megan the Gangsta, and you can follow Max and I over at nerdinitiative.com as we review the latest movies, shows, and comics.
If you want to actually see our beautiful faces, you can follow us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at Vigilante Vibes Podcast, where we post live clips from our episodes. You can join our non-toxic Facebook group of over 50,000 Marvel fans, the Nerd Haven. Follow our public Facebook page, Vigilante Vibes Podcast.
We have new episodes premiering every week, and if you like what you've heard, please hit that subscribe button, and if you really love us, drop a 5-star review wherever you're listening to the episode. We would so appreciate it.
Our next episode will be all about D23. I will be live at the convention in Anaheim, California. If you find me at D23, I will be giving out some stickers. We will be bringing all of the Marvel, Star Wars, and Disney Parks news firsthand, so make sure to follow our Twitter and other social medias for live updates. We will be doing a roundup of all the drops and surprises in our upcoming episode, so stay tuned and tell your friends. Thanks for tuning in, and goodbye for now.
Goodbye.